It's easy to get carried away with the wide range of ships planned for various roles in Star Citizen, and in almost any scenario you would think the larger the ship, the better it will be. And while cost might reflect that, that's more a reflection of who should own it, rather than why. We've talked about the power of owning a small ship before, but we haven't gone in depth on why owning and operating large ships can be a curse to the solo player. Many have prepared, many are unaware. So today we're going to talk about the complications of multi-crew gameplay and resource management, and why getting the bigger ship might not be the best option. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. So each ship in Star Citizen has different attributes that people care about. The gun hardpoints, the shield sizes, the SCU of storage it can haul. Another aspect that makes a big difference but has never been very important is the bed count. This is because beds will make the difference between longer range ships meant to be locations you can log on and off from, and short range ships that'll need to return to port. The reason it hasn't been a big deal yet is because you can really log on and off at any bed anytime whenever you want, as opposed to the future when beds might be more limited. As you can imagine, this number of beds then helps to determine how many players should actually be on the ship. But there's another reason you'll want to be wary of the numbers: life support. At CitizenCon 2022, we got a very explanatory look at the life support and resource management systems we've been reading about for some time. And one of the focuses was how many players can exist in a room without overpowering the life support systems and killing off all the people inside. This is only briefly touched on, but it's a very important point. Just because you might have the space for the people doesn't mean you should use it. So picking the right people, an efficient group of people, starts to be a concern for your big ship. And that goes further with the amount of power, gravity, and all-around wear and tear you'll have to deal with. As I had said, life support is a part of a much bigger segment of the game though: resource management. And resource management is the key to balancing what a player can do with a given ship if they decide to grab multi-crew ships without a crew. This is the definitive first step in making multi-crew gameplay a reality. That gameplay that finds your friends on the turrets fighting alongside you, while you're scrambling around and keeping the ship repaired and running as an engineer, and some new kid you just met is draining the boost, spamming chaff, and just deleting all of your ship's power as they try to get out of this battle. Everybody has a job, and every job determines the health and success of your ship and its mission. Think Sea of Thieves, but with the terrifying cold threat of the dark vacuum on the other side of the wall to deal with. The point of resource management is to make sure that it is a group, an org, a team, a militia that's getting those large ships, as opposed to just one player that doesn't have the resources to help with them. So let's stop here and take a look at all the parts of resource management that we know about, and how it complicates life for multi-crew ships. The first part of resource management is all about the power. Through power management, players will be able to underclock and overclock the components of their ships to run stealth mode or to get more out of their components. They'll also be moving relays around, as we'll talk about soon, and defining the path for that power to move throughout the ship based on what is needed at that time. The crucial point here is balancing power draw from supplies, whether that be a power plant or a battery source. Power resources then factor into your item maintenance. Those same components that can be over or underclocked will need to be repaired if you overuse them and abuse them past their normal running parameters. This may mean repairing or replacing subcomponents, or replacing the entire component itself. We've been hearing about these physicalized components for a long time now, and while CIG has said they are important to get working, we've seen no signs that they are anywhere close to functional. Key to note, this is also a key part of salvage gameplay, as the most valuable salvageable materials will likely be those still functional components you find in the derelict ships. Relays, on the other hand, keep components connected and keep power flowing through them. These relays don't really do anything for the ship, they just transfer power. But as we've seen in multiple demonstrations now from 2020 to 2022, certain relays being disabled could disable critical components or even cripple half of your ship. And given these relays will be in unique places on each ship, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to be the best engineer for a certain ship. knowing the specific layouts of some ships more than others, and being the person to go to keep them running. Then there's life support, which will be exactly what it sounds like. This system will determine the temperatures and atmospheric conditions of the space you're in, and allow you to change them on the fly as you see fit. This includes a number of things that factor around the atmosphere in a ship, space station, or building, whether that's depriving a boarding party of oxygen, a fire of its fuel, or just cooling down a cargo hold for the sake of precious cargo. Access control is a feature we saw implemented in the most basic form a few years back, allowing only party members to access your ship and creating a chat room for the ship you're on. This new version of it will be proper permission systems that allows players to assign roles and limitations regarding the ship and its systems. So you can assign a pilot, an engineer, a turret gunner, or more. While this could get quite cumbersome, it's important in making sure players with certain levels of proficiency have access to certain things, so you don't have to worry about that cargo loader flying off with your ship, or that turret gunner having access to the railgun. The interface by which these permissions are given and maintained is probably going to be pretty crucial to get right. Finally, gravity controls are pretty straightforward. We all experience it pretty often, so we get it. And in a space game, it's definitely something to consider. But in the future, it will also be something to control. And this captures the spirit of resource management more than most, because this isn't something that ever necessarily needs to be turned into an interactive feature, but gravity control could change almost any scenario that plays out. From boarding ships to stealing the ship cargo, conducting a firefight, maintaining a fire, repelling forces, transporting components, to even just rationing power. The puzzle possibilities that sandbox designers can use for this are going to be pretty interesting, and the fact that it's applicable to spaceships and space stations can probably create some interesting scenarios. All of these unique elements will apply to the outposts, cities, space stations, and spaceships that we use in the game. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be as involved with it as all this implies. Not every ship is built equal. The power of owning a small ship shines through again in the amount of tasks that you'll have. In fact, a single-seater ship doesn't even need to worry about gravity, as it has no interior. And it makes sense. The smaller a ship is, the less resources it would need, the less work it is to run. And that's why that bigger ship will always be cursed with higher and higher investment to keep maintained. Forgetting about the defense of larger ships, the fuel costs, the docking prices, food, ordnances, and salary of the crew on board, you need to keep the wear and tear on components down, and be able to man all systems in times of emergency. Even on a ship as small as the Starfarer, which will be a common ship out in Pyrocom 4.0, you're going to need a competent crew to get out of a tough spot. And in order to pay that crew and keep them helping with the ship, you're going to need to be able to take on enough work or high-paying enough work to make sure they're all getting a salary. This is part of an attempt to draw importance to all ships based on their specific roles, rather than just their size or power. If you have 3 friends with you, it won't necessarily do your group better to be in a Polaris than a Constellation, because a lot of those positions in the Polaris will leave you vulnerable. The same, of course, goes for a Hull C versus a Freelancer Max, an Orion versus a Mole, or an Odyssey compared to a 400i. If you aren't looking for multi-crew gameplay, then that multi-crew ship could start to feel like a burden as more of these game systems come online and you don't necessarily have the crew to help you out. And with resource management entering the game possibly next year, the rest of the game will begin to follow suit. There are a lot of game elements that can relate to this in some way. In combination with the armor system, ships could be disabled more often than destroyed, with the crew usually surviving. Physicalizing these components means they can be sold, repaired, or salvaged in the game now. New prop interactions will be more important with these changes being made as well, like the fire extinguisher needing to combat these new hazards, and an easy option to remove and carry your helmet and put it back easily. Those are just a few examples of related features that resource management heavily affects, but the biggest way it really changes gameplay is that it offers a new layer of gameplay that can be added to almost every mission or area we already encounter. Bunker runs might have power supplies that need to be restarted. Xenothreat could eventually become a ship boarding event. The 890 jump rescue mission could benefit from a zero-G firefight. And those less traveled parts of the cities may have some tasks to do for local mission givers. This isn't just adding something new to the game, it's expanding greatly on what's already there. And since there's never been anything there to really limit the use of larger ships, this change could really affect the way they're being used. But this is going to take a ton of time to balance. A ton. We can already see it in some places. Recently, the mole mining ship was balanced against the equivalent amount of prospectors in order to give it unique advantages over many singular ships. And the testing of this system is already underway on the Hammerhead for larger ships, the Hull A for small ships, and the Ares for cockpit ships. The work is here, it's ongoing, and being reported on every month on my monthly report videos, but it's going to be a long time until all ships can be updated with this technology. So be ready for this to take a while to implement and balance, but also be ready for it to slowly start complicating all those multi-crew ships that are currently out there flying solo. If you'd like to keep up with the development of Star Citizen and keep getting updates on features, ships, and updates, consider subscribing to this channel or my second YouTube channel, which hosts my podcasts and other more casual content. And if you'd like to ask any questions or just chat about the game, come hang out in my weekly live streams to see more gameplay. And if you'd like to support this channel and get exclusive videos every month, check me out on Patreon at the link down below. The next exclusive video is coming out a week after this one, and it will be looking at exploration gameplay, how it's developed, and what we should expect from it. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.